everyone, welcome to this Book Dragon Book Tour interview. My name is Michelle Marshall, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by the star of this week's book tour, MJ Watts, whose first name is Malcolm. Hi, Malcolm.
Good morning. Good to speak to you again.
And you, Malcolm.
Uh,
Can we start by introducing our viewers to the world that The Worms in Fool's Fingers portrays? It would be great to know more about the era and location it's set in.
yeah, and I'll launch into that by telling you what the book's about. I think probably the best thing. The book is about witch persecutions, and this was a particularly horrible period in European history. It took place during and just after the 30 Years' War. Now, 30 Years' War is a conflict that not that many people know well. It's really underrepresented in literature, I find. But it was a terrible, one of the most devastating conflicts ever to happen in Europe. Um, and for 30 years, I think it was about 33 in total. But at the end of
Mhm.
it all, the place was decimated, the entire European continent, mainland Europe, um, particularly Germany, where a lot of the story is set. And there was just nothing. The land was razed. It was nothing grew. Livestock died, and the peasants were starving. Uh, Not just peasants, just everyone was starving. There was just nothing
Mhm.
to have. And that caused a lot of tensions. I mean, this isn't a history lesson, so I won't go into it. But there was tensions basically between the Catholic South and the Protestant North. Um, Southern states being aligned to the Holy Roman Empire, northern states being aligned to the Lutherans. Um, so that was the war. So as I say, I won't go into the causes of it, but the outcome was there was nothing left. It was a wasteland basically, and people wanted somebody to blame for all this. So
Mhm.
and the blame fell on those on the fringes of society who were regarded as being witches. It was obviously their fault that this had all happened. And that set in motion a series of witch persecutions throughout the land, in which hundreds of thousands were arrested, horribly tortured into confessions, and then ultimately executed. Um, there was very few that didn't face the ultimate sanction. So, having traveled quite widely in Germany, in fact, I lived there for a couple of years. I This is where I found out all these stories, and I visited the locations because even back then, and this was a lot of years ago, more than I'd care to admit here, but I thought someday this is going to make a great novel. Um, Whether I was capable of doing it, I didn't know back then, but eventually I did settle down and think, right, let's see what we can do. And the Worms and Fool's Fingers is the outcome.
So you
So
mentioned that you lived in Germany. Is that what interests you most about the era and location that you've actually experienced
it had
that?
a big influence, yes. I mean,
Yeah.
uh, it was I mean, I didn't know back then that all this had happened. But if I
Mhm.
visited somewhere like one of the worst persecutions was in a place called Würzburg, uh, visiting there and Bamberg, where there was a huge witches' prison, doesn't exist now, but prison built just for witches. Having visited those places and found out about it, um, I thought, yeah, this is where we're going to go. And yeah, living there obviously mattered. Otherwise, I may have been, completely in the dark, and this would never have happened. But
Mhm.
that's how the germ of the idea came about.
And who are the main characters in the novel, Malcolm? And were any of those inspired by real people?
Um, no, well, the short answer to the real people, no. Although what I've done was take traits from various people I've known over the years, both physical and character traits, and sort of put them together, just sort of jumbled them all up. So
Mhm.
a physical description of one needn't necessarily reflect the character of the person I had in mind. I just jumbled it all up. Um, but the main characters, Um, right. There's a band, let's call them a band, of
Mhm.
travelers moving together because they see their fortune lying in joining this witch craze. There was a lot of people making money by hunting down and persecuting witches, and they wanted to be part of it. Particularly there's three Germans who were, the word we'd use now is mercenaries. It was a different word back then, Gelandsknechte. Um, but they were fighting in the English Civil War, and in which there were a lot of German mercenaries used by both sides in the English Civil War. And they meet up with a couple of others, an Englishman who happens to be a Geordie. Now, I'll say that in sort of inverted commas because the phrase Geordie didn't exist back then. Although I've
Mhm.
used it in the book, it really didn't, but I put a little, explanation. So I meet up with that, and then there's a lady that they meet on their travels in England. And then it sort of moves down. They go back, and first of all in Holland, in transit to Germany, where they meet a seafarer from the Caribbean island of St. Martin. Um,
Mhm.
so there's he comes into it, and then there's various others come and go out of the little group. Um, I think that my favorite characters, if I can have, as a creator, I can have favorite characters. There are two sisters, the Gaia sisters, who are worse than any of the men. Are really cruel and
Mhm.
and heartless couple, and had real good fun creating that. So, and they become witch hunters themselves to deflect any attention that might come their way.
Right.
So they're the central characters, but there are many, many characters in the book um,
Mhm.
that sometimes I struggle to keep track of, but they're the main ones, yeah.
I imagine you had to make a lot of notes as you were going on to keep track of everyone.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of spreadsheets, but yeah, occasionally they're useful. Yeah, yeah. And I
If you
do
had to
that because
summarize,
my
oh, sorry,
handwriting
Malcolm, go on.
is
Go
so
ahead.
that's no, I was just saying I do that because my handwriting is shocking, even though I can't read it. So I just
Well, if you can't read your own notes, that can be an
yeah,
issue.
that's right.
So, if you were to summarize the book in a few sentences for our viewers, how would you do so?
Um, More or less along the lines of the blurb that I put on the back, but I might expand on
Mhm.
that a little bit. And when I was thinking about this question, I jotted something down. I don't really like reading from notes, but if you wouldn't mind bearing with me for
No,
this.
go for it.
So, what I've said, it's an epic saga of innocence caught up in barbarous witch persecutions. And it's about the zealotry, lust, and greed that turned ordinary men and women into really cruel and ruthless oppressors.
Hmm.
The world is one where there's little difference between virtue and vice. Hardship and misfortune are common, and where lives are influenced by events and forces beyond the control of the individual. And I think that's the best way I can possibly sum it up. It's long, it's complex, there are various strands running through it, but I think that encapsulates it. I'd like to hope so anyway.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. So, do you have any other books planned, Malcolm? And if so, can
Okay.
you give us a little preview of what these may
All
be?
right, okay. I have one which has just been through a professional appraisal
Hmm.
and edited as a result of some comments from that appraisal. It's pretty much ready to go to copy editing. I think will be the next step, but that will depend on
Hmm.
which route I decide to go down. It's still historical novel, but it's early 20th century,
Hmm.
and it concerns. It's like a coming of age novel as well as a historical tale, and it concerns a young man from a very remote Scottish island who becomes sort of displaced in his family, um, leaves the island, joins the army to begin the World War One. This is really seriously injured at, I've used the Somme because everybody knows the Somme, recovers and then attempts to go back to his old life in Scotland, and it just doesn't work, mainly because he incurs the enmity of a military colleague, and that follows him throughout his whole life. And there are a series of events which lead to a climax back on the island, and that's, without giving any more away, that's essentially what it is. It's slightly more literary, I would say, than The Worms of Fool's Fingers, which is a straightforward historical adventure. This one deals with a few more aspects, such as family, religion, and friendship, things like that, you know. So that's that one. And then
we'll look forward to having that at the Book Dragon. It sounds like
well,
you've got some other
that
things
won't
in
be
store
too
as
long.
well.
Hopefully it won't be too long before that sees the light of day. I'm thinking maybe it's early next year. And while I'm waiting to see what happens with that, I've started on a new project. Now, I don't even know if I'm going to complete this. It was just an idea. You'll be aware that there are a lot of these locally set crime novels. Usually featuring one particular character, and there's a series of books, you know, without naming names. I'm sure a lot of people will know who they are. And just about every area of the country has something like that. Now then, I'll never be capable of writing a crime novel. I wouldn't know where to begin. But I thought I might take that concept and put it into a different genre and see what happens. So at the moment, I'm just tinkering around. I'm sort of planning out the stories. And then I've done maybe 20 pages just to test the idea. So over the next couple of months, I'm going to be working on that and see if it's worth taking forward.
And what genre will that be then, Malcolm?
Yeah.
What genre will that be?
I'm thinking of a horror genre. I've always been a
That's very exciting.
I've always been a horror fan, you know. Although, having said that, there's only a few authors that I really like in that genre, and I've got to try very hard not to copy them. But I never thought I'd be able to write that myself, but I'm going to try. And if it doesn't work, we'll just tear it up and move on. But I'm going to give it a few months to see how it develops.
Yeah, well, best of luck for that. Sounds really exciting. And thank you for answering my questions today for our viewers. It's been really interesting to interview you. And Malcolm's going to be one of the amazing indie authors who will be in attendance at our Hydrocon Book Festival this Saturday at the Ark in Stockton-on-Tees. Be sure to stop by and meet him and pick up signed copies of The Worms in Fool's Fingers. Bye for now, Malcolm. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Goodbye. I hope to see some of you there. All right. Goodbye, Michelle.
Bye for now.